It's time to reimagine the climate fight. And here to help us do it, a young climate activist whose passion is unrelenting, whose energy is infectious, and whose activism is unapologetic. Welcome, Vanessa Nakate. Hello again. I don't think I'm alone in saying that it's really wonderful to sit in the chair that I'm in right now, but it can also be challenging because we are so incredibly privileged to lift up voices from people doing the most important work around the world. But that also means that we're constantly surrounded by what's really going on out there, by how difficult the problems are, and how dire the consequences will be if we don't fix those problems. But every once in a while, you come across somebody who is really doing not just the work on the ground, but is able to make you stop and take stock and realize that all the things that are in front of us are actually possible. And they're able to make you believe, not just because they're doing the work, they're able to make you believe because they so clearly believe. And they're willing to do anything that it takes for people and for planet. That's how I feel about the guest that we have today. And that's why I'm so grateful that she's here with us in the SDG Action Zone. And she's going to be able to inspire all of you out there to take action just the way she has. So please welcome Uganda's first Fridays for Future activist and the founder of the Rise Up movement, Vanessa Nakate. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so nice to be with you. And we're so grateful that you were here from all the way from Uganda. It's wonderful to have you in this conversation. And I thought maybe the natural way for us to start would be for you to tell us how you came to the climate cause in the first place.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be speaking with all of you today. I remember in the year 2018, I wanted to do something that could cause change in the lives of the people in my community, simply because I had grown up seeing my father taking part in activities that made people's lives better, like providing health facilities for them, like providing food for them, like providing water facilities for them. So I decided that I wanted to do the same thing, but I didn't know exactly what I had to do. Therefore, I started to carry out research to understand those challenges. And I was really surprised to find that climate change was one of those problems and actually the greatest threat that was affecting their lives. The truth is, in school, climate change was taught as something that either happened in the past or something that is coming in the far future that we don't have to worry about. But when I realized that it was a current problem, when I realized that different communities in my country, Uganda, were experiencing devastating impacts of climate change, I decided to become a voice in the climate movement by joining the strikes with the Fridays for Future.
That's amazing. And just from your answer right there, I'm sure everybody out in the world and watching in the SDG Action Zone realizes why you are such an inspiring person, because there is that seed of activism in your family, but you didn't just take it for granted that you would go and do whatever's available. You actually conducted research, and then from that research built an approach. And how do you think, for those folks watching right now, how would you recommend that they get involved in things like this, that they find that sort of seed of passion that you were able to find if they're looking for it, but they don't necessarily know where to start or how to actually get motivated on the level that you so clearly are?
Well, the first thing is understanding that the world is facing multiple problems, that people are facing different challenges across this planet. So you have to search out for those challenges and you realize where you lie as a voice, where you lie as a solution. Because I found quite a number of challenges, but my heart felt so connected to climate change because I felt like this was the biggest challenge that they were facing. And I thought that my voice would add something to this challenge and make people's lives much better. So you have to realize that there are quite a number of challenges, and you have to look for that voice within you that will speak for that specific problem for the people in your community. It all starts with you desiring to give the change, to be part of the transformation. And all you have to do the moment you make a decision is to use your voice, to use your platform, to use your resources.
So listen to the internal voice and then take that to an external level.
Exactly.
I love that. I'm also really struck by the urgency with which you speak about this issue, because for those of us who have been in the kind of activism universe in one way or another for a long time, we often think about these problems as having a long lead time. Not that they're not urgent, but that work is incremental and it will take time to achieve the things we want to achieve. And it just sounds like you're not taking that approach at all, that this is a problem of now and a problem of urgency, and something that you are not just hoping, but demanding that leaders and everyone up and down the entire human race takes this seriously right now. So can you speak a little bit to urgency and why it's so important to you to press that particular aspect of this issue?
People need to understand that the climate crisis is an urgent issue. It is a now issue. It isn't something that is coming in the future. Because if it was something that was coming in the future, then we wouldn't be having people suffering right now. We wouldn't be having people dying right now. That is what people need to understand. We are not talking about climate change like we are expecting it in the future. We are talking about a disaster that is affecting people's lives right now. When you look at different parts of the world, I would say that we are all in a mess. From Africa to Asia to Europe, we are all in a mess. And of course, we may be facing the same storm, but we are in different boats. If the planet is burning, some places are burning more than the others. If the planet has caught a fever, some places have higher temperatures. They feel more impact than other places. So we have to recognize communities that are already facing devastating impacts of climate change. And people need to realize that if we do not address this issue, that means it affects every sector of our lives. We cannot achieve any sustainable development goal without addressing the issue of climate change. Because when you look at eradicating poverty, climate change is pushing millions of people into extreme poverty. Climate change is keeping people in a poverty trap. When they are trying to get out of the poverty, a disaster hits and they lose everything. Countries are pushed into economic crisis. So that means they're going to be kept in that place of developing nations are not actually going to the next step. We cannot achieve zero hunger if climate change is leaving millions of people without food. We won't be able to protect the life on land, life underwater. We won't even have gender equality without addressing this issue. So when people understand that this is an issue that is connected with every other issue that pertains to our life, to our peace, to our happiness. That is when they realize that this is a crisis, this is a challenge, this is a catastrophe that is affecting the lives of the people right now. We cannot have any peace without climate justice. We cannot see a happy people and a happy planet without climate justice.
Yes, first of all, yes, exclamation point. But I am so struck by this idea that the crisis is bigger in some places than it is in others. And when you think about it deeply, it becomes very obvious very quickly that the leaders in the places that are least affected right away are also the ones that are often leading the charge, so to speak. Those are the ones that we're speaking to, and they just don't feel like this is an immediate problem for them. So what are your thoughts on how to bridge the gap, on how to make those people who are not in the developing world really understand that this is a problem they need to deal with now, even if they're not feeling the effects yet, because it is affecting somebody, because like you said, the fever is burning hottest in places that they're not exposed to. How do you get them to understand and have that sort of empathy so that they really want to act the way that you have?
The only people who can make everyone understand the urgency of this issue are the people who are in those communities that are impacted the most. So I would tell them to listen to the stories of the different activists in the most affected communities, in marginalized communities, in indigenous communities. It is one thing to say that we are facing a climate crisis without recognizing societies and communities that have been facing this disaster for a very long time. We need the voices of these activists in places like this, in platforms like this, like one that you have provided for me today. We need more activists in these spaces to tell their stories, because I believe that every activist has a story to tell, and every story has a solution to give, and every solution has a life to change. I'm from Uganda. I may not critically understand what is happening in Kenya, what is happening in India, but an activist from India is in a better position to explain how climate change affects them. So we have to embrace these activists. We have to listen to their stories. We have to amplify their voices. We have to invite them in these spaces and in these platforms. We have to invite them to the tables of discussions, to the tables of solutions. But again, it is one thing to invite them to these tables, but it's another thing for their discussions to weigh less. If they are invited in these spaces, even their discussions, even their voices should weigh like the rest of the activists.
So that it's not just lip service. But I have to say, it's about listening, right? Because I would argue that we didn't provide this platform for you. The SDG Action Zone didn't create something for you to fill a space. You demanded this platform. And I think that's such an inspiration for young activists, for anybody who actually wants to make a difference on these issues. It is almost impossible not to hear you. And that's so instructive for any of us trying to make change. I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, because I know while we're really excited to have you, you've been incredibly busy. So what are you working on at the moment?
Well, at the moment, last month we had two installations of solar panels and eco-friendly stoves in schools, and these were schools in Gayaza district. When I started this project, what I wanted to see was a transition, because I know that the people in rural communities where we are doing these installations, they do not have the money to transition. It is one thing to tell them, stop using firewood, stop cutting down the trees without giving them an alternative. So with this project, we are able to provide alternatives so that people can try as much as possible to live sustainably, to transition to a sustainable future for them. And then I've also been in preparations for the global strike, which is taking place on 25th of September 2020, that is this Friday, because we need the leaders to face the climate emergency. We need every leader to fight climate injustices. We need to keep speaking up. The pandemic didn't silence us. It didn't silence the climate movement, because we continue to see disasters, because temperatures didn't go down. So that is what I've been working on. Preparations for the global strike this Friday, and also the installations of solar panels and eco-friendly stoves in schools.
That's amazing. And how can we support you in your work, or those of us who are watching right now?
Well, for the installation, it's a project that is fully monitored and financed by the internet. And as I speak right now, we have been able to do installations in 4 schools, and looking forward to doing another installation probably next week or beginning of October, because we were able to raise funds for 2 more schools. So by October, we will have covered 6 more schools. So I can say that you can support in any way, in any kind of donations or sharing that project, because you are changing a life, because we are reaching out to these rural communities. And we also believe that with this project, we are able to improve on the quality of education for students, an initiative that is often left out in environmental circles.
Absolutely, and that intersectionality is so incredibly important, because as you said, climate is one of those goals that stretches across the entire 2030 agenda, and that cannot be ignored. Now, I want to touch a little bit on the pandemic, because obviously this is something that has ravaged the world, and to your point, in different ways, in different places, and to different degrees. But we're about to see the hottest 5 years on record on this planet. We've also seen in 2020 CO2 emissions drop 4% to 7% as a result of these lockdowns and the pandemic. And what lessons do you think, as an activist, and particularly as a climate activist, should we be taking away from this lockdown and pandemic experience? Because clearly a lot of things that we thought were not possible actually are possible. And is there a way for us to take that learning and apply it to this cause?
Well, of course, from this pandemic, there is a lot to learn. It showed us very many things. First of all, that leaders are able to listen to the science, that they actually believe in the science, but they only choose on what to listen to. If they were able to listen to the science of the COVID-19 pandemic, we expect them to do the same for climate change. They must fight every crisis. And also, this pandemic has shown us that people are actually able to change behaviors. You know, many times when we talk about things that we can do for the planet, for the climate, people claim that those things are very hard, they cannot easily adapt to them. But this pandemic forced people into adapting to new ways of living, meaning that a person is able to embrace new ways of living, and we need to move towards equity. We need to move towards a sustainable future for all of us. So there is a lot to learn from this pandemic. It has shown the vulnerability of our economies through the health systems, through the food systems, through the water systems. Because in this pandemic, people have struggled to get food, people have struggled to get water, people have struggled to reach health facilities. So it has shown the sickness of the system that needs to change. And it has showed us that we cannot go back to what we used to be. We can only move forward. We can only move towards a future that puts the people and the planet over the profits, because profits haven't saved us in this pandemic.
I have to ask, are you hopeful?
I am hopeful. I am hopeful because, first of all, the public, the people have seen that it isn't hard to actually change ways of living. And then I'm hopeful because people have seen how messed up the system is, how messed up the society is. So I believe that they want something better. And then I'm hopeful because millions of activists haven't given up. They are still speaking up, they are still demanding for action. We all want a green recovery, one that ensures that the lives of the people are protected.
It's all incredible. And I'm, again, so inspired listening to you, but I'm also, I wish that this kind of passion, which we often hear in people of your generation, sort of translated up the chain. So I wonder, how do you think we can help leaders kind of understand this passion and get that fire in them, so to speak, to be motivated on this? Because you're right, the science is out there, the science is real, the science doesn't lie. But to your point, folks only seem to want to listen to it when the situation is so dire that they have no choice. So I wonder, from the other end, is there a way for us to inspire them from a place of just hope and positivity, like you just talked about, to say this is that important? How do we take that fire that so many wonderful young activists have and just shoot it up the leadership hierarchy?
First of all, the leaders know the truth. They know the facts. They know
Say
the
it again.
danger that we are
They
in.
know it.
They
Absolutely.
know it. They know the kind of situation that our lives are in. They know that the future is at stake. So, what we have to do is to keep doing what we've been doing, to keep speaking truth to power, to keep pressuring them and telling them that we want a better future for all of us. We want climate action. We need to keep the temperatures below 1.5 degrees. We need to stop any activity that is contributing to the rise of temperatures. We need to let them understand that we cannot eat coal, we cannot drink oil. A time is going to come when they're going to realize that we cannot survive with money if we do not have any life support systems. So, what we are telling them, they already know. We just have to keep pushing them and pressuring them to the point of having political will to take the action that we are demanding for. Many of them say that some of the solutions that we are giving, they're complicated, they're hard for them to do. But there is nothing hard about this. This is an issue that involves human survival. This is an issue that is about the lives of the people. We are literally between the line of life and death. And we have to try as much as possible to keep on the side of life. So leaders must understand that.
Vanessa, I just have to ask you to say it again. We cannot what?
We cannot eat coal and we cannot drink oil, basically saying that we cannot serve fossil fuels at the dining table.
Absolutely. Now it's interesting because one of the criticisms of young people prior to this most recent energized climate justice movement was that there was a lack of follow through, and there wasn't a sense that the younger generations could stick with a cause and actually move things forward. And we're seeing the opposite of that right now. What do you think the obstacles are, though, to engaging more people in the movement? Because as you say, it requires just a kind of relentlessness that you clearly have, but I think some people find intimidating or don't think they're capable of. So what is your advice to them?
I think we need to educate as many people as possible, because I come from a country whereby climate change wasn't part of the education system. So I didn't even know that my future was at stake. I didn't even know that my life was in danger because of climate disasters. So educating people, I believe, would change a lot, and it would bring awareness to the people, and it would cause them to demand for action. Because I believe that if someone knows that they are in a burning house, they will do their best to get out of that house. So education will be able to create awareness and push many people in demanding for action. And if we are many, if we are working together, if we are united, we will be able to demand for the justice that we want. And I know that we will get that justice.
We have to make them understand that the whole house is burning. It's not just
Exactly.
one house in one place, or for a few people. Who are the voices that you still want to hear more from on climate? Because this is a conversation that does affect everyone, but often there are many voices that aren't elevated or aren't brought to the fore, even though they're the ones being most affected. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to who you want to hear more from and see more of in this conversation.
Well, there are quite a number of people that I would
It's a
love
long
to
list.
hear from. It's really a very long list. But then, if I'm to break it down, I would say that try to get a voice from every country. Try to have every country speak up, because they understand what is going on in their communities. So I may have really a long list that I can't break down, but I must say that every country has someone speaking up, and we need that person's voice amplified.
And that's one of the lessons actually of this pandemic universe that we're in. We're doing the SDG Action Zone virtually this year, fully virtually, and it's only its second year of ever having happened. And it's actually made it possible for us to bring so many voices to the table that would have been more incredibly challenging if we were trying to do all of this in real life, so to speak. So from that perspective, it's like we've got to take every opportunity to bring new people and new voices who are already on the front lines of this fight into the conversation and give them a real seat at the table. And as you said, not just to give them lip service, but to actually listen to the things that they're saying because they know better than many of the rest of the folks in the conversation actually do. Something I think would be wonderful to hear from you, if it exists, is if you had sort of, a moment of clarity or an epiphany that actually brought you that sense that climate was the thing. Because you talked about the research and you talked about coming from a tradition of activism, which is incredible. But was there a moment that you can point to where you actually saw something or did something or felt something and realized this is my cause and this is why?
I think that moment was when I realized that it was the greatest threat facing people's lives. And I decided to educate myself and read more about it and
How did you
carry out
realize that,
research.
though?
Well,
How did you realize it?
well, when I realized that different challenges were in people's lives, in people's communities, I felt a connection with climate change that I honestly can't explain. But I think it came from the point of I didn't know this was a challenge, but now I know that it's actually a big problem. Because if I knew that it was a challenge, I know different challenges. I know people face challenges of poverty, having health complications, or having no access to water. But I really didn't know that this is something big. This is something that is affecting people's lives. So I think that moment of realizing that this was a major crisis that is what led me to read more about it, to understand its causes, to understand its impacts. And the truth is, when I saw some of these impacts, I had seen them on the news before. The floods, the droughts in my country, I had seen these things, but I had never made the connection to climate change. So I think it all came from that place of, I didn't know this was a crisis, but now I know. So let me read about it and see how I can add my voice to demanding for action.
You were literally called to this cause, but you were called to it by information, right? You were called to it by actually understanding what was happening. And I think that's beautiful, and it's an incredible lesson. So before we wrap up, I have to ask for a call to action. What is there in your mind that all of us watching you and wanting to support this cause and wanting to support all the goals can do right now to actually advance these causes and fix these problems that are so pernicious and will continue forever unless we act now?
Well, right now, I think the call to action I would talk about is something that is often left out of environmental circles, and that is education of girls and young women. I believe that we ought to be looking at solutions that are human, solutions that we know can work, and not just engineered solutions. Many times, education is left on the sideline. So, my call to action would be for people to actually advocate for education of girls and women for climate, because girls who are educated, they make better decisions, they marry later on, they learn more about family planning, they know how to survive issues in their communities, they know how to live and get out of poverty if they're educated, because good secondary science education brings a better understanding of climate change and a greater urgency to tackle it. Today's girls are going to be tomorrow's doctors, they're going to be tomorrow's scientists, they're going to be tomorrow's campaigners. So this is an issue that we actually need to be speaking about. Education as one of the solutions to fight climate change.
And education for all, but education for girls in particular. I love that you made that point. I also realize I have to ask you, when you started down this climate justice road, you were kind of on your own. And I wonder if you could reflect a little bit about it, tell folks what I'm talking about, because I would love to hear it from your perspective, and talk about what it's been like to see that movement build from you by yourself into you now being here with all of us, and really being just so known around the world for the passion that you've so aptly displayed today.
Well, beginning was, of course, it was a very tough decision to make. It took me like a month to decide on becoming an activist, because growing up I was kind of a shy person, so I was really
I can't believe that.
I was really scared of going to the streets and holding the placard. So my first strike, I had it with my siblings. All of them are in boarding school, but this time they were at home. So the very first strike that I had it with my siblings. Now the challenge came with the following strikes. Since they had gone back to school, I had to continue with the strikes by myself. So it was very hard. It was a very tough thing to do, but I think the more I continued doing the strikes every Friday, the more confident I became and the easier it became for me.
And before we close, can you just paint that picture for us? Because when you say you were by yourself, it's not just that you were by yourself. Where were you? What were you doing? And how long were you doing it before you became the person we see right now, a leading voice on climate justice?
Well, my first strike by myself, I went to the parliament of Uganda. And when I got there, I stood with my placard, and the police authority that guard the parliament, they came to me and they were asking me why I was standing there. And I told them that I am demanding for climate action. Don't you see that our planet is in a mess? Don't you see this disaster? That is what I'm advocating for. I want protection of our planet, protection of the people. And then they checked my placard like a million times, because they were looking for a specific hidden message. I don't know. Maybe they thought it was a political strike. So they checked my placard, trying to look for any hidden messages. And I told them, I'm doing this for the planet. I am demanding for action from the leaders. And later on, they let me strike. And while I was doing the strike, one of them brought me a glass of water, and I was really surprised. Yeah, so that was really my very first strike on my own. It was scary, especially that part when the police authority came to me. But then after talking to them and explaining to them that this is for the planet, this is for our home, they let me stand there for another hour.
They were your first converts, it sounds like. So I really hope as we wrap up that all of those folks out in the SDG Action Zone and around the world who will see this for weeks and months after, just hold that picture in their heart. I literally cry every time I do these events, and it's always funny to figure out what the moments are. But thinking of you sitting outside alone, deciding to do this work, and getting to the place that you are now is just a drop the mic moment. So I know you know that, but we are so happy to support you and to lift your voice up. And I hope everybody out there supports what you're doing and continues to fight for climate justice. And with that, thank you, thank you, thank you, Vanessa Nakate. I hope to see you again.
Thank you too.